All right, let's go. All right.
All right, Dad. Well, we'll talk about the big news. Everybody thought Shohei Ohtani, the Japanese Babe Ruth.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, was coming to Toronto. We were all excited. We were tracking all the private.
Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just using Toronto as to boost up what he was going to get at the end.
Yeah, so he signed with the Dodgers, Cindy, 10 years, $700 million.
$700 million.
$700 million.
For 10 years.
That's a lot of money.
So I wonder how they would structure that contract.
I don't know.
Like, is it 10 years, but, deferred over 20 or 30?
You better have a good tax lawyer, boy, for
Yeah,
that.
especially in California, right?
Oh,
Baby.
Yeah, tax. I think in California they take half your taxes.
Yeah, the highest tax thing. But I mean, he's probably got a company in Japan and all that. So,
well, he said he's like Babe Ruth, eh?
Yeah.
All right. When Ruth hit 59 home runs in 1929, Bob Musial was second with 24 home runs. So you always look to see the guy that's the second.
yeah, that's what the stats guy said. Stats guys say if you want to find out how great a record is, find out who was second. And the bigger the difference, the greater the record.
Okay, Bobby Orr won the scoring title in 1970-71 with 139 points. J.C. Trombley was 63.
So he had 76 more points than Trombley.
That year he had 37 goals, and Guy Lapointe is next with 15 goals, 22 more goals. All right, now in 74-75, a great guy coaching that year, he won the scoring title with 135 points, with Potvin was second with 76, a 59-point difference, 46 goals, and Lapointe second with 28, a difference of 18 goals. I mean, you think of what he'd be worth today.
I don't think they'd pay him $700 million, though.
No, I don't think they'd give him part of the club, though.
Yeah, that's true. They could. I mean, well, you think about it. If he was going to,
he was supposed to get 18%.
Well, that'd probably be close to.
I don't know why. I never could figure out why Harry didn't phone me and say, we're going to give the guy 18, and I could have talked to Bobby every day.
But the one thing, I was listening to some guys talking on the radio, Jeff Blair being one, and he said that the Jays were really going after him, and they said, but they started missing some guys that they could have signed.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. All I know is they didn't get him, and 700, holy, that's a lot. That's a lot of money.
Okay, Dad, we're going to take some more questions, and this one is from Facebook, from Greg, and it says, Don, I watched your team in Rochester and remember John Bendarski playing, and then listened to him on the radio, and do you have any stories about John?
I remember, I used to, a stick room, used to be a stick room in the back. I used to go there. I never went in between periods. I was walking out, and I saw this guy, and I'm not mentioning his name. Well, I won't mention his name. And I said, hi, how you doing? He says, don't you talk to me. Don't talk to me. He says, you sent that bully out there to get, and I'm thinking his son was playing for Halifax. And I'm thinking, geez, I don't remember sending Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly was the guy that, and I'm thinking, and I'm thinking, who the heck is he talking about?
Even a bully, too.
Yeah, a bully, too. And he said, that's John Badari. John Badari? And he was accusing me of sending John Badari out to get his son. It was, now I'm mad. Now I'm really mad. I said, I am not going to send Badari after you. I'm going to send Bob Kelly after your son. That was the end. He said, geez, I better keep quiet here.
Well, I remember an incident with John Bendarski when it hushed the crowd in the War Memorial. I remember and he got clotheslined. Do you remember that too?
Right in front of the bench.
Right. Oh, it was awful
Yeah.
to see him. He hit his head in the back of his head.
Yeah, he didn't wear a helmet then. And
Yeah, nobody wore a helmet. Very few people. And boy,
Yeah.
oh boy, to see a guy like that go down. Woo.
I think I remember that was that something happened that the ambulance had left, I think. So
Yeah.
John Denhammer had to drive him, and John Badari thought he was his mom.
No kidding. Eh?
Yeah, he kept saying, "Mom, where are we going?" and all that. So,
Yeah.
but he came back, didn't miss many
No,
games.
he didn't miss many games. I kept kidding him all the time. You know, he had to miss a couple of games. And I kept kidding him. But he came back and played. John Badari, he was a tough little guy, boy.
Yeah, remember the time though you were saying he played with Rick Pagnuti, who set a lot of records in Rochester. He was really good. He was a really good hockey player. He'd be in the NHL now.
Oh, Rick Pagnuti. He could shoot that puck right close to his ankles too, eh? And he could really hum it. He was really good, Rick Pagnuti. He'd be in the National Hockey League. How I ever got him, I'll never know. Anyhow, I remember it was I got to set this up. Bendarski pinched in, and Rick Pagnuti never pulled out. He stayed right in with him, and the guy got a breakaway, and he scored, and the whole deal. And so the next day, we're out standing around, and Rick Pagnuti was really sensitive about this thing. You know, he never figured it was his fault or anything like that. And I'll say, you know whose fault that was? That was Rick's fault. Oh, jeez. He almost fainted. And then I had to tell him the reason I told him he was his fault was because he should have pulled out, and then but a 2-on-1, and I'll never forget that. And what was the other thing? It was
John played 100 games in the NHL. John Badari.
He was. I remember he was in that there brawl that we had in Providence, and the two policemen come in. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, two policemen come in. They still had their glasses on. They had their smoke glasses on. They had their helmets on. They had their gloves on. Holy dino! We've really come into something here. And I think Fogel broke his leg. Ron Fogel broke his leg. It was
who was fighting?
Oh, I think that was the time I said to John, the only time I've ever sent anybody on to fight was John Wensink. And I said, John, John, would you like to take a shift out there? He says, I think I would. And I knew. And him and Bert Wilson, lovely guy from Shelburne, Ontario.
Yeah, he was really tough.
Yeah, he was really a tough guy. Oh, it goes on and on and on. Anyhow, we had a riot, and it was in the back of the paper of New York, and they had a picture of the month or something, and you should have seen the bodies piled up in the. I should have saved that, and you should have seen the bodies piled up, and in the picture.
And with John Badari was in the middle of it.
And John Badari was right in the middle of it.
He fought Dave Schultz, you know.
And he survived.
Yeah. So, Dad, we're watching some games this week. We watched Toronto and Ottawa. It was a good game. That was Toronto squeaked it out. I always laugh, like Toronto in Ottawa. It's like a home game for the Leafs. And we were watching Buffalo in Montreal in Buffalo, and it was like a home game for Montreal.
Well, they can go over and get tickets. You can't get tickets here for the.
You don't know who was the home team. There was, especially on the shootout. It was like, where are we again? Oh yeah, Buffalo.
So do you think the Buffalo players get a little ticked off at that?
No, they do. There's no doubt. I remember Harry Neal saying that people who were out in Vancouver, they were celebrating, and every time the Leafs did something, if they like Toronto so much, why don't they go back there and live? I mean, that was Harry Neal.
So, Dad, the Sens hired Jacques Martin as senior advisor to the coaching staff. So, poor J.D. Smith, he's got more guys looking over his shoulder and breathing down his neck. But you have an idea who we're not saying he's going to get fired, but if there's going to be a new coach of Ottawa, you have an idea who it might be.
And I think it'll be Jay McKee of Kingston, Ontario. Yes. Yeah, you'd like that, Cindy?
Good.
Yeah, Kingston, Ontario. He's coaching the Bulldogs in the OHL, played over 800 games. One of these guys was a defenseman who lived by his wits. That's,
And usually those guys make the good coaches, right? Like you and Al Arbor and,
The owner of the Steve and Steve Zell is comfortable with him, coached in the AHL and the OHL. And he's a pretty good coach. He knows what's going on.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you wonder how long, Jack.
Well, I hope J.D. Smith keeps the job because I was the guy that said he'd be in the National Hockey League. And that's a tough job, believe me. That I know what I know.
Well, you were just saying how we were watching the highlights this morning, Sunday morning, and Brindamore, like they're on a 4-game losing streak, and boy, he looked like he aged.
I tell you, that coaching job, you think it's an easy job. It's not an easy job. There's always somebody waiting to take your job and waiting for you to get fired.
Especially when you have assistant coaches around.
But I'll tell you one thing, why coaching in the National Hockey League is not as easy as it looks.
So, Dad and Cindy, we'd like to thank one of our sponsors, VintageTendy Magazine. It's a magazine for goalies by goalie. That's where they get the tendy from. It's great quality. It's got fantastic pictures.
Yes, it does.
That's one of the highest quality magazines you'll find. Like if you go to any magazine rack, you're not going to find.
It's like a coffee date.
It's almost like a coffee book type thing. Super high gloss finish, unbelievable pictures, and this issue has Clint Malarchuk on the cover, and there's a bunch of stories. You have one by about Chuchak and
I talk about Bobby Perreault.
Bobby Perreault, yeah. And
never heard of him.
So visit VintageTendyMagazine.com or visit their Facebook page, Vintage Tendy, and if you're looking for a Christmas gift for somebody who's a big goalie or has a man cave, it's a good idea to get them a subscription.
All right. Now, go ahead, Tim.
So, Dad, speaking of goalies, we got a question from Brent Poole from Facebook, and he asks, why are there hardly any good Canadian goalies besides maybe Binnington?
That's a good question, Tim. And I think you're the guy that can answer that the best.
Well, it's interesting because we looked and I thought, well, who are the top Canadian goalies? So tell me, Cindy, have you heard of these guys?
No.
Aiden Hill, Cam Talbot, Connor Ingram, Tristan Jerry, and Logan Thompson.
The American goalies, tell about them.
So American goalies are Jeremy Swanson from Boston, Thapper Denchko from Vancouver, Joseph Wall from the Leafs, Jake Ottinger from Dallas, and Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there.
So is there different rules for development of goalies?
No, Tim will tell you why.
Well, one of the reasons I think is because so many CHL teams bring in older European goalies. And American goalies.
Because they want to win.
Because they want to win. And they draft goalies. Very rarely do they draft goalies high. And then the goalies that they do draft, they're never going to make the CHL. So they go down and they play either midget or they play tier 2. And if they play tier 2, they want to win. So they're playing older goalies. Right. And the kids just don't get, there's 2 or 3 years of a lost year that they really don't get solid goaltending,
And they have to work at it. And when they when they do the practices, they have to work at it. They don't get the games.
They don't get the games. And this is something that Hockey Canada should be worried about.
Absolutely.
Instead of, what if should the kids be wearing bathing suits in the gross showers, which, again, just boggles the mind. And I think what they should do is that if your import draft is a goalie, that's it. You burn your other import draft.
Well, when I was there, they stopped it.
They stopped it for a while, and then I don't know if they got pressure.
I'm sure the Liberals
they got back.
Yes, it's not fair. Not fair not to have Europeans in the.
Meanwhile, the Canadian parents spend a ton of dough, developing kids in minor hockey, and then they're ousted by the Europeans.
But that is a thing, is that you wonder if the goalie's just too expensive of a position too.
Oh, well, I know that.
Yeah, and
with the pads and the sticks and all, but
especially goaltenders.
That's really unfair, and people don't realize that, right?
let's face it, Carey Price was the best last really great Canadian goalie.
Yeah.
I mean, he carried Montreal to the finals.
Yeah, he
wrecked his career, and they went from the Stanley Cup Finals, and then he was out. They would end up last place in the league, so it shows you how much they depended on him. But they just, again, that's something Hockey Canada should be worried about. And
you can't blame the owners for wanting to win. The money that they invest in these hockey teams, that most of them probably do lose money. So, and the way they only draw the crowds is if they win.
especially getting into the playoffs.
Absolutely.
I watched the junior hockey. I watched Frontenacs play, and they don't pack them in either. No. And I know he loses money every year, and I think most of them, except
there's a few
London
and those guys make money, but that's the thing. I laugh when they say, "Oh, Hockey Canada develops the players." Hockey Canada doesn't develop.
It's the owners of the clubs that take the beating. Every year they take the beating every year,
and they don't get the recognition.
And they don't
should.
get the recognition. In fact, they get criticized.
And they get sued, don't they?
Yeah, they get sued. They get criticized.
All I know is the owners. When I look at the crowds, I see a lot of empty seats, and they are the people that put the guys in the National Hockey League.
Okay, Dad, this question is we got from Twitter from LV Hockey, and he wants to know, Don, they were watching the Sens versus the Panthers, and Brady and Matthew Tkachuk were fighting. Did any two brothers that were ever fight during a game?
Well, they didn't fight each other. They were fighting.
Yeah, they were. I remember the Primos used to begin the fight. Wayne Primo of Buffalo and Keith Primo of Hartford. Wayne started to scuffle, fooling around with the goaltender, back and forth. And they both got into it pretty good. And they were throwing them pretty good. And after the game, and I know this is hard to believe, no, I don't think it was after the game. It was at the end of the period.
Between periods, because imagine they're thinking, geez, what are Mom and Dad going to say, right?
Yeah. What are they going to say now? The two brothers fighting. When I came to the locker room right after the game, I wrote this down. I was really upset. I called my parents right away. My dad was laughing, actually. He was laughing. And my dad wouldn't have been. I was looking for someone to settle me down, and my dad said, well, here's your mom. Talk to her. And he said, go out there and see what you can do to tie the game up.
A true hockey mom.
My mom and dad would have been upset.
So you guys would have played against each other. Where would you have been playing against each other?
We played against each other, and he came in, I think Quebec came in and played it.
In Quebec, and you were...
he was playing in Quebec, and I was playing in Springfield.
In Springfield, you played against each other. Did you ever hit each other or anything?
We never went near each other.
No.
Didn't you say the Plager brothers used to...
The Plager brothers used to get into it all the time. And the three of them, there was three of them. There was Billy, and there was Bob, and there was...
Barkley.
And they used to get into it pretty good. And they used to get into it off the ice, too. But they used to throw it pretty good. And when they get into it, they really would get into it.
Dad and Cindy, spreads.ca is now Northstar Bets. It's still Canadian owned. It's still one of the best places to play in Canada. They have everything you're looking for: slots, live dealer tables, and sportsbook with built-in sports betting insight and analysis. Listeners who already have accounts on Spreads don't have to do anything. Just sign in to northstarbets.com. And they're doing an exclusive offer for our listeners. If you sign up or put a deposit with the promo Cherry, Northstar Bets will match your first bet up to $100, and you get 100 bonus spins and then another 10 bonus spins on the big wheel. And this offer is limited while quantities last and not available in Ontario.
And it's Canadian.
And they're Canadian, yep, which is a big thing. And they'll be like to thank them for always helping out with Don Cherry Pet Rescue.
That's right.
They do a lot.
Okay, this is from Dave Stoneley from X, also formerly known as Twitter. That's right. And Dad, he wants to know, do you think the sport is getting too expensive for the average family or person? He says, I know there's a program in some of the major cities, but not in every town. And he believes it has gotten totally out of control. And who knows, the next Bobby Orr could be playing soccer.
Yeah, well, he could be playing soccer because all you need is shorts and running shoes. I've maintained this right from the start, even when I was on Coach's Corner, that you can get used equipment at places, and some of them aren't even broken in. And
that's where I got my last pair of skates.
I bought all of Dell's skates were always used skates. And those were goalie skates.
Yeah.
Always used. I don't think he ever got a pair of new skates. Because by the time he breaks them in, his feet have grown.
Yeah.
So you're breaking your skates in for the next person. So it just didn't make sense.
Well, anyhow, I would buy used equipment. Eric Lindros bought used equipment. I say used equipment. You should go into used equipment.
But the thing is, it's really expensive, though, is the sticks. I mean, a goalie stick, and, you know, when you get a goalie stick, I mean, it has to be
I think they're coming down a little bit.
Not much.
I don't know. I was, 10 years ago, I was paying $350 for a goalie stick.
Yeah.
Well,
because if they're not light, the kid doesn't like it.
I remember John Gardner when he was the president of the OHA. He used to pick up two players, and as they were going, he'd have the two players in the car, and they'd be going to the game, and they'd look up, and there'd be a guy waving to them, kind of sad, and waving to them, and he had more talent than both the guys that he had in the car. And the mother just couldn't afford the kid with the most talent.
I know, and again, we talked on Hockey Canada. This is something that Hockey Canada should be working on.
Yeah.
But again, they're more worried about should they wearing bathing suits in there, and I've told the story.
Well, you know why that is.
Yeah, but they shouldn't be okay. You want to be worried about that, but they have over the years. They should be worried about how expensive the game is going, and they could make rules. And even like Wayne Gretzky, he's trying now. He has 3 sticks for $99. Because I remember one time I was talking to a guy who's was a father, played for the Toronto Marlies in the GTHL. And this was probably 10 years ago, and his son broke a stick. The father banged his head against the glass. And I said, how much does that cost you? And there was maybe 2 weeks left in the season, and they were going to go in the playoffs. He said, I spent $5,000 on sticks already.
Well, for instance, I mean, we spent a lot of money on on goalie sticks and all this, and when the player's about to come out of the penalty box and the goalie bangs his stick on the ice, right? And Dell, he just keep wailing away on that stick, bang bang. And I said to him after the game, so help me, if you crack that stick, banging it on the ice, you're going to use your backup stick for the rest of the season. So, we wouldn't want that. So every time he goes to bang it, he'd look up at the crowd. He's only like 6 or 7 years old. He'd look up at the crowd and I'd shake my finger and he'd lightly tap it. So there's a perfect instance. I mean, it's tough.
The sticks they're very expensive. Well, you can't do much about it. You got to go and have your son not break too many sticks.
Okay, Dad, here's a question that came from Facebook from Aaron Andres. And I hope I pronounced that name right. And he wants to know, Dad, why did we quit making Rock'em Sock'em videos? And he asked the question because his kids loved watching the DVDs, and when they were traveling in the car to the games and everything. So what happened there?
Tim, I've wondered that myself.
No,
Why?
30 was a good round number to end. I mean, it was. It was getting more expensive with the footage, and everybody wanted rights, and that's the thing that happened was everybody wanted a piece of the pie, right?
Oh,
the NHL owned the rights, and NHL was really good to us towards the last 4 years. But CBC owned the footage, and then Sportsnet said no, they own the footage, and then you had to work it out with them, and it was just. Yeah. At the beginning, nobody cared about footage.
Yeah, that's right.
Nobody cared.
30 years ago, they were giving it away. Nobody cared about it. And by the end, it was like,
who owns the rights?
Who owns the rights?
Is that it?
Was the big
So
thing.
30 was a good time to quit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, that was a good time. We were still selling quite a bit. We were and still hold the record for the best-selling non-theatrical Canadian release by far.
Okay.
So, we just thought, you don't want to end at 31. That's kind of weird,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Instead
30 was a good time to stop. One day we'll talk. You know, Tim, we should talk about the history and how we got started there. And what was that show you did?
Well, it started with what was Sportsnet Connecticut. We did a show called This Week in Hockey.
Oh yeah,
Way back.
And we had the little dogs.
We had a little dog. It was crazy how much work that was. We didn't get any money for it.
It was a good.
But it was before its time. It really was to show the highlights. 'Cause
It was.
There was nothing then.
No.
The way they analyze the game to death now.
We get in before everybody.
Yeah.
One day we'll do the history of Rock'em Sock'em, and it should be very interesting.